Hey, thanks for checking us out on the Ticats audio network and on our various social media channels. It's Louie Butko alongside Luke Tasker, RJ Broadhead, Andy Fantuz, and Mike Daly with our year in review show. And Luke, I want to start with you because, on the player perspective, and maybe Mike would have been the better person to start with, having actually been in the locker room. But when you think about the way that the season ended, semifinal East Division loss, that's a lot different than losing in the Grey Cup. How does that affect a player?
Yeah, it is different. There's a special sadness that comes losing a Grey Cup, though. Save that for later. But, years like this, I think back to 2017, although that was different without making the playoffs. It's a little different. We actually won the last game of the season that year. But certainly went to the Eastern Final and lost in Ottawa and lost here in 2016 to end the season. It is. It's never, there's only one team that's happy at the end. And those, particularly those 5 teams that lose in the playoffs, that's a hard way to go home. It always struck me as being very abrupt at the end of the season. You lose the game, and the next day there's meetings. You're packing up your locker, and you're out of there. There's maybe a handful of guys who stay around in the off season, and that's it. And everyone's on their own to get ready for next year. So it's disheartening. It takes a little while to sort of get over the just abrupt. You've been with these guys every single day for 6 months, and now it's done. It is hard.
And Mike, I mean, the way the Ticats played in that final third of this season, going into the playoffs, they were playing with some momentum. This wasn't a team that really expected to lose that. You never expect to lose, but this is a team that had belief that had they won against Montreal, they would have had a shot in the final, and they would have had a chance in the Grey Cup.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always talking about, what's the hottest team going into the playoffs, right? It's not necessarily who finishes first, whatever it might be. It's that hottest team, whoever's gelling. So there was true belief in that locker room that, this will pan out well, especially to get to the Grey Cup. You got to work through the East, who had their struggles all season long, right? But yeah, there was belief. But on Luke's point, anytime you don't finish with a win at the end of the season, it's kind of disheartening. It's like all this effort that you put in for as long as you did, right? 22 weeks plus the training in the off season, all that kind of stuff. It's disheartening. But Luke, it's funny how you said it's so abrupt. I remember my first year after, we had lost in the Grey Cup, we get back there and we start talking about flight details the next day. I'm like, whoa, we're not having a week long of meetings. It's like, no, people are leaving that next day to get home, and it's like that abrupt about it.
You come from university and you finish the semester after your season
right.
ends. Like, it's done, man.
Right, you at least get to go back to school and see everybody or see them in the wait. Nope, not here. It's okay. See you later. See you next season.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, to that point, when you're a player, you finish the year, how do you use that loss as motivation? There's going to be a lot of motivated guys who have been to the Grey Cup, guys who went to 2 straight Grey Cups. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to be thinking, how am I going to get better? As a player, how do you put yourself in that mindset in the offseason?
Yeah, well, there would be times where I'd have flights booked for vacation reasons
right.
before the season even ended, and not knowing how far you're going to make it. And you talked about you don't want to finish on a loss. Well, there's only one team who's happy finishing on a win. 2017, we finished on a win, but we didn't make the playoffs, so you're not exactly happy. I guess you have a little bit of temporary, happiness, but the only time I actually did win the final, the big game, I had a flight booked a week from the game, and I had to cut my Grey Cup parade party short and drive home from Regina in the snow to catch a flight to to Mexico or something. So it's kind of funny how that works. It's like we were talking about thirds of the season all year long, and it was, they finished 5-1 in the last third, and the hottest team. Yeah, you want to be hot, you want to be healthy going into the playoffs. But this year, it just seemed like there was such a fragile team. And in that last third, you saw a little bit of character of overcoming adversity within games, a big where finding a way to win. Where earlier in the season, it was more of just a little crack, and, the ship would fall or would sink. And it just wasn't that year. So I don't know if this team felt that abruptness of the end of the season where it could have been starting to sort of break away as the season was going on, and there was a little bit of dysfunction within the group, and you just never really had the sense that, okay, this is the team that can actually do it and win, because of it was so hard to win when you make any mistakes.
Well, and the hard part about that too And sorry, RJ, but the hard part about that too is that when you've had that experience in the season where it's like you get into this dark spot where you're like, we can't win anything. You know what I mean? We fall apart. We're blowing leads, whatever it might be. Even though you feel like that hot team going into the playoffs, that can come back pretty quick, right? And one bad thing happens, like that kind of sneaks up pretty fast. So it's like, it's really sensitive for that entire season, and that lasts into playoffs no matter how hot.
You saw that in that playoff game, right? You fall behind early, have a little bit of not able to run the ball like you were able to in the last 6 games. Just things aren't working out the same way, and it's just that you just didn't see that fight that you're hoping to see, right?
I like hearing from you guys because you're ex-players and you want to win all the time, and the championship's what it's all about, and that's what it is for fans too. But look at how this season went for the Tiger Cats. 0-4 start, 1-5. Really the first half of the season, first 2/3 of the season was not very good. Put it together in the final third and made the playoffs as an 8-10 team, and beat a lot of the teams that had made the playoffs and advanced. But when losing in that East semifinal, I was just impressed the Tiger Cats made the playoffs because, I would always joke around with Luke about must-wins, and that was probably 4 weeks into the season, probably week 5 when they had to win against Ottawa. I was trying to make you say it was a must-win, but it was getting to that point. It's an 18-game regular season. You run out a runway at some point. So they did put it together in the final third. I'm impressed they made the playoffs, and Montreal was the better team in the East semifinal. But another thing I wonder from athletes, you lose in the East semifinal, but you learn from that, don't you? Like this season, there were so many things. The second halves with blown leads and the turnovers. Like it's a lot to go through in a season, but don't you get the sense that's not going to happen again?
I do in one sense, but it's a lesson that you don't have a game the next week to turn from, right? So if you learn a lesson like that, in 100 years, those lessons will teach you to win a Grey Cup, but you've only got one career to go and try to win, and it's disheartening at the end. And to your point though, Coach O in our last show this year, I go, what do you got to do to win the Grey Cup? Thinking he's going to give me some off-season insight. And he says, don't turn the ball over. And it is true though. Like you just can't do it. I mean, and it would have been a record-breaking Grey Cup victory by a team who ended the regular season negative. I think it was 22.
Yeah. And there were a lot of positives to take from the season, and a lot of things to build upon for the future, the immediate future of this team. And it does start with Coach O, I think. And you could see that belief coming back, like you're talking about, throughout that last third of the season, and even the way that we were having fun with them on the post-game shows, and you could see that was there, and that culture is built. And so there are so many good, positive aspects of the Tiger Cat organization, especially like operations and in this locker room, that to build upon. But you don't have next year with the same team. It's going to be so different, whether it's coaching staff, players.
Yeah,
it's going to be so different every single year.
Interesting part of this, because it looks like there's going to be a lot of changes. We just look at the free agency list. I mean, you're not going to keep everyone. There's going to be roster turnover. Mike, what do you think the message is going to be day one at McMaster? Is it going to be different than what we had heard in previous years? Is it going to be the same message on that first day that you hope goes all the way to that December or November 19th at the Grey Cup here? What do you think the message is going to be day one at McMaster come 2023?
Yeah, and like to kind of build on what RJ was saying, where you're trying to, what do you take home? What do you learn from the end of the season? Well, Luke's absolutely right. You learn a little bit yourself, like, okay, how'd the season go for me personally? What can I do differently? Maybe get out of my back pedal a little bit earlier, or maybe run my route this way. But you can't learn something for the team. I think the people that learn that is like what Andy was saying, the coaches, the personnel. That's who really has to carry all of that over to the next season. So now when you go to day one of training camp for next year, and I mean, we all know Coach O enough. Is there going to be anything different?
The message is going to be simple. The Grey Cup is here in Hamilton, and we want to hoist it. Late November, whatever the date is. And that's the message every year. It's the Grey Cup.
And it's how are we going to get there?
It's here. We want to hoist it in front of Tiger Town.
I want to go to day one of training camp and have you ask Coach O that question.
Coach, what was the message to the players today?
Is it the
Same
same
as
message
always,
as last
Louie.
We
year?
really want to start the year on a right note, so maybe that won't be the first question. But I mean, you bring up the Grey Cup, and we'll get to that. But still looking back, you mentioned the positives, Andy. What is something you're going to remember this season from where, the results the season didn't end the way you wanted to, ended a lot earlier than you thought it was, but maybe what are some positives you can take from this season, specifically or otherwise?
Well, I was fortunate to be able to do a little guest coaching in training camp, and I never had Coach O as a head coach. So for me, it was an eye-opening experience right from day one of the way that he approached the meeting room and the culture, which was in a really positive way. It was incredible. Just, we are people. We're going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not because you're expecting to get something from it. It's all foundation before function, and it's all about just, doing what's right and being a good person. And we're going to develop great people, look at each other for support, trust the guy next to you, be loyal to each other, count on each other, and I think that that's a winning foundation. I think that that's something that I'll never forget. I took a ton of notes, and I've also reiterated a lot of those comments throughout the season in different aspects of my life. So that's a big takeaway for me this season, was the impact, me just sitting in that locker room, not even as a player, especially a first-year player or something, but even over all my years of playing, just sitting there, and the impact that his words had on me, and then in turn his assistant coaches, how they followed under his lead and delivered the same message. That was really, really wonderful to be a part of.
Mike, I'm going to go back to you because you had that unique perspective of being an analyst for this team for about 6 months, and then you strapped on the pads and you were in this room with the players. What stood out to you from the time you were watching it from a 10,000 feet view to being in the locker room? What do you take away from this season?
Yeah, and my perspective of it was coming into the team when they were on that roll, right? When they were starting to get hot, when they finished the season in that last third, 5-1. So there was true belief. There definitely was true belief, but you could tell that they had worked through some stuff where it was like, it was dark times for a little bit, right? It was dark times, and there was multiple people saying we worked through it. But on Andy's point, Coach O is fantastic, and like a little tidbit from the locker room is there's always this conversation over what is your response to adversity. So when something goes wrong, what's your response to it? It's not what goes wrong, it's how are you going to respond to it. And I think that's what it was on a larger scale, is this adversity that was the first 2/3 of the season. Their response was, okay, we need to turn the ball over less, and we need to start putting some wins together. And that's kind of what I felt going into the playoffs. So there was true belief where it's like, there is no question we will beat Montreal this weekend. And just didn't work out because that's football. But you could definitely feel that Coach O messaging, which will not change for next year at all, right, is that how do you respond to that adversity?
And it works in real life, too. Obviously, I never played for Coach O, but some of the stuff he says, and if something's not going right in a day, I'll say to myself, hey, the only thing guaranteed in life is adversity. So, and it does make you feel better, and you kind of process a little bit better.
I got my Coach O bingo card. I didn't know I could use it today, but I guess I can. Thank you for that. Luke, I want to talk about players that stood out to you. I mean, again, individual performances. We saw guys like Tim White have a great year. Jovan Santos Knox really emerged as a defensive stud in this league. But what else did you pick up on this season that makes you excited about 2023, or just genuinely happy to see in 2022?
My mind first goes to the defense, honestly. Jovan Santos Knox and Cam Kelly and those guys. Tunde Adeleke has just had a great career and continues to do that. Jamal Roll, and kind of the list goes on defensively. And it's interesting, the season ends and there hasn't been that much CFL action yet, but you get our linebacker. We signed our Sam backer.
Yep.
Somebody fill me in here.
Cam Kelly?
Yeah, no, not Cam, but
Kyle Wilson. Yeah, that's what we're waiting for. Yeah,
is our
Kyle Wilson, our one signing. Yeah.
Really, it's interesting that we bring him back, and he had a very interesting kind of niche role where he kind of wore a lot of hats in the 2022 season, and clearly he was a guy, season ended, and he's been the move that's been made so far. defensively is encouraging to me. When I go to the offensive side of the ball, you mentioned Tim White already, and that was great. Wes Hills at the end of the year made a difference for sure. And of course, my mind goes to Brandon Revenberg and David Beard on the offensive line. Those guys kind of came in and solidified what was a very shaky position group to start the season. Of course, Revenberg, for the fourth time, I think he was the runner-up of the most outstanding offensive lineman in the league, which is amazing. But he's a big-time player in this league, and the Ticats have been able to keep him around. I've heard both Coach O speak to his respect for Revenberg, and Revenberg speak to the respect he has for Coach O, and it seems like that's kind of a good relationship and something that the Ticats will want to continue. So they do have a lot of players, that you'd like to see back next year.
And Andy, I mean, to that point, you need those players. You need those players who have gone to the Grey Cup and felt that sting, who are in this room, who when things aren't going right, they can grab them, they can shake it out. Because, again, this is a big locker room. There's a lot of bodies. There's a lot of personality, and you need those players who can bring a defensive guy who might have some beef with somebody else. But,
yeah, when you're missing a guy like Chris Van Zyl for a big portion of the season, I mean, he's in the locker room, but when you're not on the field leading by example, same thing with Simone Lawrence, missed a chunk of time.
Curtis Newton as well.
Curtis Newton in special teams. You look at Dylan Wynn when we lost him for the season.
Addison.
Like Braylon Addison, right at this.
The list goes on with that, man.
These are like some key guys for that glue or that intangible that the gel that you don't really have a objective way to put it, but these are the guys that you kind of need. So getting those guys back next year would be key. I think the offensive line was a big improvement through the season. You already mentioned it, but that's something to build on. And then you can't really leave this conversation without talking about the special teams. Yeah. I mean, Lawrence Woods at the start of the year was on track to just shatter records. I mean, he was incredible. Speedy B-esque when he started with this team years ago, and then bringing in Seth Small. I mean, he had the highest field goal percentage in CFL history for a single season. So those are some key pieces that, healthy through the whole year, that if you can rely on those and build around it and focus elsewhere, it is really crucial.
Especially when how shaky the kicking game was to start, right? Like, that's the toughest part, is because it was such a mismatch of, okay, maybe we're going to sign John Ryan, and then
John Ryan signed. He was in the building.
Well, that's what I mean.
That happened this year. Like, I know
and Dom Magala had to do both, and he was kind of that wild card, and then to have Seth kind of step in and be like, you know what, I got it, and then just kick 90% out there and start putting points up on the board for an offense that couldn't really get in the end zone. Huge, right?
Do you guys remember Tag Leader?
Yep.
Like, remember him hitting that game-winning field goal in the preseason game? I mean,
Seth Small was the answer.
It's a long
I'm glad
season.
you brought him up, because when I was watching the Grey Cup game, and it's a point difference, and I went through 53% of the games in the CFL were decided by one score. So if you can make your field goals, get the points when you have the opportunity, and that's what Seth Small did. And it was a different feel when he'd step up. You really thought he was going to make it. He was 4 for 5 from 50 yards or more, hit a 58-yarder, 90.7%, which is the highest field goal percentage in Hamilton Tiger Cats history. Yeah. So, and special teams, I went through and looked at the numbers, top half in everything except punting average, but the opponent return average, Tiger Cats had the best. They held the opponents to the least there. And you mentioned Mark Washington, Luke. Tell you, as a Ticat fan, I was a bit nervous when Ottawa, Sean Burke and Bob Dice is a great hire for Ottawa, and Mark Washington will be a head coach in the CFL. But to have him back in a Grey Cup year, 2023 for the Tiger Cats, as the defensive coordinator, it was kind of one position that you didn't really worry about. And if there was a big play on the defense, it was almost surprising. You didn't expect it. So that's usually a good sign that the defense is playing well.
You asked about what one of our most memorable parts of this year was. As far as the our TAN team, our Ticat Audio Network team, for me, like driving to work, listening to Daly and Courtney with Ticats game day, then getting in the building and hearing all these random, well thought out stats that are just like, oh wow, crazy from you,
And then stealing them for the pregame show.
Right.
just getting everyone's perspective on the game, going to talk to Coach Sal, going to talk to Milty. You know, like I really enjoyed our pregame to the pregame show.
That was the one thing I definitely missed this year. Obviously, was the game day stuff, and the one game I did come down was the Labor Day Classic, and obviously that game didn't go the way. But there were some moments here, and that game against Winnipeg, where it was the turnaround of that final third, where it finally started to look like, okay, the Ticats are going to do something. That's something you don't want to hang your hat on one game, but to get that little tiny bit of revenge must have been a little sweet, maybe, Mike. I mean, I know you still lost the Grey Cup, but coming in and beating up Winnipeg, I mean, that's going to stand out as one of the positives for me this year.
Yeah, and that was kind of the time where it was like, that was, as RJ's, must-win game, right? That was probably one of the 7 or 8 or 9 must-win games that they had in the season, right? But that was one of them where it's like, okay, it'll really depend on how they approach this Winnipeg game and how they can stack up with the best. Because at that point, I think Winnipeg was just rolling through everybody, right? And then they go and beat them, and then that, I think, is that, like, re-energize that life into the team where they're like, okay, we can do this. We have a shot at the playoffs. We just beat Winnipeg. We got to really get this thing rolling. I think that was that energy that helped that final third kind of go the way it did. I mean, obviously, football, you're not going to win it. Like Andy said, only one team ends up winning it. But I do agree with you that that Winnipeg win was the one where it's like, okay, we can make something happen.
Expectations, RJ, I feel like this is a team that went to 2 Grey Cups, underperformed what they thought they were going to do this past year. Now they're hosting the Grey Cup again. They know what it takes to get to that game. They know what that – where do you feel like the expectations will be in this room come first game of the season?
I think the expectations will be to win the Grey Cup for the first time since 1999. And, sometimes you have to take a step back to take 2 steps forward. And we all know Coach O. We talked about him. First time in his head coaching career in the CFL that he didn't make it to a Grey Cup. There were a lot of learning lessons this season. I fully expect with the coaching staff, as far as I know, all coming back, all on the same page. We'll see who they sign and who they bring in, who they re-sign. But I think the Tiger Cats are going to be one of the favorites. And there is no doubt in my mind that the goal is to be in the Grey Cup game in Hamilton in 2023 and hopefully end that Grey Cup drought.
Didn't it sting a little bit more that it was the fact that it was the Argos winning the Grey Cup?
No, I think it's good.
You think it's good?
Well, it's motivation, right?
Yeah.
Your
The
rivals
Argos.
win.
If anybody had to win, it had to be.
And then the other thing, sorry to jump in again, but the Argos did win the season series against the Tiger Cats. One of those games, Tiger Cats were missing their 2 top quarterbacks, but they weren't that much better than the Tiger Cats. If Ticats eliminate some of those mistakes, if I'm looking from their perspective, I'm thinking we're close. We were really close. If a few things had gone our way, a few fewer injuries, a few fewer turnovers, a little better in the second half, it might have been a different story. So I think they're right there.
You sounded optimistic, then you came a little bit back, but you ended optimistic. You just too many turnovers, too many. I mean, that was just fact. I mean, those are facts. Yes, that's what happened. But the optimism, I think fans appreciate that. But I also understand that there's an expectation for this team to win. It is, 1999 was a few years ago. This game is going to be hosted. I mean, there's going to be. How are the players going to feel about that expectation?
I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen day 1 training camp. Bob Young is going to walk into the first meeting room, and Coach O's barely going to talk for that first meeting. Bob Young is going to step up there, and he's going to say, him and Scott Mitchell are going to both step up there in front of players that might be playing in the CFL for their very first time, and they are going to say how important it is to win the Grey Cup. So from day 1 of training camp, a lot of the American guys are going to be coming here for the first year, are going to look up there and say, whoa, I guess we have to win that trophy right there, right? And then, hey, what's the Grey Cup? They'll start talking about it, but that's going to be the day 1 expectation. We are here to win the Grey Cup, and that's going to be in everybody's mind day 1.
I'll say, too, that we talked about Coach O's messaging not changing and the consistency of that. And there's something to be said about, what it takes to win is simple but not easy. Like, it kind of never changes across football in a good way. You can't turn the ball over. You have to score points. You have to block and tackle. I will say that Coach O has that true story of what it takes to win a football game. He has a good way of putting of retelling the same story to kind of strike fresh. I mean, he had analogies for seasons that we had of climbing a mountain and sort of a progress throughout the season. Of each win, you get a little bit closer to the summit, which is a Grey Cup championship. And he's gonna get that message through. And what it means to this is unique to our league, that there's only 9 locations that the Grey Cup could be, and so a home Grey Cup is more common in the CFL than in other leagues, and you have a chance to do that in 2023 in Hamilton again, and the importance of making that happen.
Andy, I want to acknowledge the elephant in the room, and that is the free agent quarterback that the Ticats traded for on Grey Cup week, and Bo Levi Mitchell. And it shouldn't be understated that the goal is obviously to sign him. You don't make this deal unless you think you're going to sign him. But what his leadership, what his championship caliber experience in this locker room will mean for a group that has been so close. He's gotten there. He's taken them over the edge. And again, it's the elephant in the room. Once he signs, I'm sure other players will sign, but his leadership would be much needed here in Hamilton.
Yeah, it's tough really to comment on it because you don't know what's going to happen. But he's unquestionably the most decorated quarterback in the past decade. He's arguably one of the best quarterbacks of all time in this league, and it goes beyond just his skill set on the field. It is his leadership with all that dynasty of the Stampeders that he took them through for so many years. So he's going to bring things both on and off the field, if he signs here, that are valuable. And I think we're all fans of the quarterbacks that were here this year, but there's something had to change when you have those turnovers, when you have those losses, and this looks like what management's thinking could be the answer, but to speculate on it, it's really hard to go.
Well, and I mean, to that point, I've obviously said my praise about Dane. This is quarterback under contract here, and for him to have that moment where he came out this season and said, I've been struggling. Like, mentally, I have not been all there. I mean, I felt like that was a huge moment for athletes and for fans to acknowledge that, man, these are real people at the end of the day. That, it is easy to sometimes forget that it's easy to send a tweet sometimes, but these are real people with jobs who have lives outside of here. And I just thought that was a really important part of the season that I hope isn't forgotten. That Dane was open with his struggles with his mental health and how that affected him on the field, and talking to a therapist. I just thought that was a moment that we don't often see from professional athletes, and I hope it's something that's not forgotten in the season that we've had. We mentioned the Grey Cup in 2023. It is here in Hamilton on November 19th. What are you guys most excited about? We were just talking about the previous Grey Cup being a year ago this week that we're sitting down here. Mike, what are you most excited about for the upcoming Grey Cup?
Yeah, I mean, just that.
Now, Mike might be playing in this Grey Cup still, so we don't know about that.
Okay, no.
Where's his locker plate? Is it still here somewhere? Where's his stuff?
What I'm excited about is that, and I'm sure both of you can attest to this. Anybody that's been, around Hamilton for a playoff game, let alone a Grey Cup game, I was lucky enough to play in that, the last one we had here. The atmosphere is unbelievable, right? Every one of my favorite games ever playing is the playoff games that Hamilton is able to host, right? And yeah, Hamilton's got to work hard to get those home playoff games, but then to have a Grey Cup on top of it, the atmosphere is incredible because all the fans come out and they are louder than ever. I mean, it's going to be Tiger Town faithful out there, you know what I mean, no matter what. And that's, honestly, that is the most enjoyable games I have because of how loud it is, how excited they are, and you just feel it. Like, it radiates through. It's something different completely from the regular season. I'm sure you guys felt it too when there was any sort of playoff game. It's a completely different world, really, it feels like.
Yeah, and we had the Grey Cup in Hamilton in 2021 that they were telling me was abbreviated in some sense, but it was a blast. I mean, it was
Right.
It was unbelievable. I mean, the week was amazing, and there will be more than that. We've gotten sort of a little sneak peek into some of the things that they're thinking about, and they're going to go all out for it. The city, the team, the league. I mean, it's going to be a great and historic Grey Cup, and it would. Just imagine if Hamilton is playing in that game. It will be pretty special.
I was talking to Milty on the 12th around 11 a.m., and I was thinking that, 365 days ago, the three of us were sitting at the convention center doing our pre-game show, getting ready to go down to the stadium. I've definitely learned some lessons from the first Grey Cup I attended to this one that I'll be attending. But RJ, what are you most looking forward to when it comes to the Grey Cup in 11 months, less than 11 months now?
Yeah, the city will be buzzing and full fan support, which is best in the league. And with the team, I'm excited to see in the coming weeks and months and who signs and what we're going to see. And I'm excited for training camp. I'm excited for the start of the regular season. I feel like, again, lessons were learned last season. I would be shocked if it's an 0-for-4 start again. It might be the inverse of that, which would be great for Tiger Cats fans. But I think the team is going to be beefed up, and the coaching staff is going to be prepared. I'm excited for a championship season. I think the Tiger Cats are going to win in 2023.
All right, let's end with RJ's optimism, which we appreciate it. Luke, RJ, Andy, Mike, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it, and have a great holiday season.